That's my heir!
The rain did not care that she was carrying a life inside her. It fell the same way it fell on the gutters, on the gates, on the black car that had brought her here as a bride 4 years ago, and now sat idling in the mud like a beast waiting to be fed. Adaeze did not cry. She had cried enough in the last hour to last her the rest of her life, and now there was only a strange cold stillness in her chest, the kind that comes after the body has decided it cannot afford any more feeling. She thought of the first time she walked through that gate. She thought of the elders who had blessed her hand in marriage, the drums, the gold clothes, the promises. She thought of how quickly a house could turn its back on a woman once it had taken everything it wanted from her. Chief Obafemi's voice was still ringing in the wet air behind her. That's my heir, not her child, not their child. His hair, as if she were simply the soil the seed had been planted in. And now that the planting was done, the soil could be thrown away. Four years earlier, no one warned her, not her mother, who wept with joy at the match, not the elders who spoke of destiny and fortune, not even Adaeze herself, who had believed, foolishly, she now understood, that a man who smiled so warmly at her father's compound gate could not also be a man capable of pointing at her belly in the rain and calling it property. She remembered the wedding. She remembered the way Chief Obafemi's son Kule had held her hand under the canopy, his eyes soft, his voice trembling slightly with something she had mistaken for love. She had not yet learned that in that house, love was a currency spent only when it was useful. She remembered, too, something smaller, something she had not thought about in months, buried under the weight of everything else. A meeting. When she was still new enough to the house to be allowed in rooms she probably shouldn't have witnessed. Chief Obafemi, seated with 2 elders and a lawyer, discussing a covenant tied to the family's ancestral land, a book clause that required a direct bloodline heir to be formally named before a deadline, or the land and title would pass to a rival branch of the family entirely. She remembered how, in that meeting, whenever Chief Obafemi said something that was not quite the truth, when he assured the elders a document was already signed, when he promised timelines he could not possibly keep, his right hand would drift to the gold ring on his finger and turn it twice, as though grounding himself in a lie. She had thought nothing of it then. A nervous habit, she told herself, now soaked to the bone on a wooden stool outside the gate that had just shut on her. She understood she had been given a key years ago and never known it was a key at all. But memory does not keep a woman warm in the rain, and it does not stop the ache that had begun low in her back an hour ago, and was growing sharper with every passing minute. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered the only comfort she had left to give, not to herself, but to the child. They can take the house. They cannot take you from me. She did not know yet how wrong that promise might prove to be. She did not know that in the coming days, Chief Obafemi would move quickly, too quickly for a man who claimed to be acting only out of tradition. He would have a document drawn up, one that would attempt to formalize a claim not just to the child's future, but to full custody the moment it was born, citing a forged elder's blessing and a signature that was not, in fact, hers. She did not know this yet. What she knew, sitting on that stool, was simpler and heavier. She was alone, she was cold, and somewhere behind that gate was a man who had once called her daughter and now would not even call her by her name. A car passed slowly on the road beyond the compound wall, headlights briefly illuminating her through the rain. It did not stop. She watched it go, and something in her chest, the last soft part of her, the part that had still believed rescue might come from outside, closed like a fist. If rescue was coming, she understood now, it would have to come from her. She was found an hour later by Baba Rotimi, an old family friend of her late father's, who had once worked as a court clerk before retiring and who still lived 2 streets from the compound. He had heard, as everyone in that quiet part of town eventually heard everything, that the chief's wife had been thrown out in the storm. And something in him, perhaps guilt for not having intervened years earlier when he first noticed how the marriage had soured, perhaps simple decency, refused to let him stay inside while she sat in the rain. He did not ask questions that night. He simply opened his gate, put a blanket around her shoulders, and let her sit by his small stove until the shivering stopped. It was 2 days later, once the fever of shock had passed, that she finally told him what she remembered. The meeting she'd witnessed years ago, the ring, the covenant, the deadline. Baba Rotimi went very quiet when she mentioned the land covenant. He knew, better than most, how these old family agreements work. He had drafted enough of them in his years at the courthouse to know that a covenant like that would exist in a registered document somewhere, filed with a formal deadline, and that if Chief Obafemi was moving this aggressively to secure the child before that deadline, it meant the deadline was closer than anyone outside the family realized. If what you're saying is true, he told her, then he is not just cruel, he is desperate. And desperate men leave trails. It was the first time since the gate closed that Adaeze felt something other than grief. It was small, and it was fragile, but it was there, the beginning of a plan.
Desperate men leave trails.
The days that followed moved differently than the ones before them. Grief did not disappear. It never really does. It made room, reluctantly, for purpose. Baba Rotimi still had contacts at the land registry office from his years as a clerk, old colleagues who remembered him fondly enough to answer a phone call. And it was through one of these calls that Adaeze learned the covenant was real, filed exactly as she remembered it. A bloodline heir had to be formally registered with the family council within 90 days of the previous title holder's passing. Otherwise, the entire estate, land title, and name would pass automatically to the Adeyemi branch of the family, distant cousins who had been waiting quietly and patiently for exactly this kind of opportunity for over a decade. Chief Obafemi's father had passed 61 days ago. That left 29 days on the clock. This was the piece that reframed everything for Adaeze. She had spent the last week believing her expulsion was simply cruelty, a man discarding a woman once she had served her purpose. Now she understood it was something colder and, in a strange way, something she could work with. It was panic. Chief Obafemi was not acting from a position of strength. He was acting from a position of a closing door, and closing doors make men careless. Careless enough, perhaps, to forge documents, and forged documents, unlike memories, leave paper trails that do not fade. Adaeze began, with Baba Rotimi's help, to quietly reconstruct what she knew. The ring, the meeting, the names of the 2 elders who had been present that day, one of whom she learned had since fallen out of favor with Chief Obafemi over an unrelated land dispute and might, if approached carefully, be willing to confirm what he remembered. She also learned something else, something that made her hands go cold, even in the warmth of Baba Rotimi's sitting room. Chief Obafemi had already begun the process of registering the child under a private nursing arrangement, meaning that the moment the baby was born, hospital staff loyal to the family, breathed or pressured, it did not matter which, were instructed to hand the newborn directly to the chief's household, bypassing her entirely. She had less time than she thought. She went to see the elder first, the one who had fallen out of favor. His name was Pa Adaeze, and he received her cautiously, aware of what her visit might cost him if word got back to Chief Obafemi. But when she described the meeting from years ago, the covenant, the deadline, and finally the ring, the way it turned under his thumb whenever he stretched the truth, something in the old man's face shifted. "I have watched that man do that for 30 years, Pa Adaeze said quietly. "I always told myself it was nothing. A habit, but you are right. He did it the day he swore to us the marriage contract met every condition of the covenant. He did it again the day he swore your pregnancy would be registered properly through the family council in the proper order." He paused. "It was never registered through the council. He has been building a private paper trail all along, one that cuts you out of every document that matters." This was the confirmation Adaeze needed, not proof yet, not the kind a court would accept, but a thread strong enough to pull. Pa Adaeze agreed to write a signed statement of what he remembered, on the condition that it only be used if absolutely necessary, and only through Baba Rotimi's old legal contacts, never directly. It was not enough on its own. A single elder's memory, however honest, could be dismissed as bitterness from an old land dispute. What Adaeze needed was the forged document itself, the one Chief Obafemi was almost certainly preparing to present to the family council to formalize his claim to the child before the 90-day deadline. And for that, she needed to get back inside the compound, if only for a few hours, without being seen. Getting back inside the compound meant relying on the one person left in that house who had never fully turned against her. Ngozi, a young housemaid who had served the family since before Adaeze's marriage and who had wept, quietly and without permission, the morning Adaeze was cast out. Ngozi had access to the study where Chief Obafemi kept his private correspondence. And after days of careful, whispered negotiation through Baba Rotimi as an intermediary, she agreed to help, not out of bravery, she insisted, but because she could not carry the guilt of doing nothing. The plan was simple in design and dangerous in execution. Ngozi would leave the side gate near the kitchen unlatched during the 2-hour window on Thursday afternoon when Chief Obafemi traveled to the family lawyer's office, a weekly appointment he never missed. Adaeze would enter, retrieve whatever documents she could find in the locked drawer of his study desk, a drawer Ngozi had seen him return to obsessively in the last week, and he leave before the household staff finished their afternoon prayers. Adaeze had never in her life done anything like this. She was 8 months pregnant, moving slowly. Every step through the compound she once called home now waited with the particular terror of a woman who knows exactly what will happen to her if she is caught. But fear, she had learned in the last 2 weeks, was not the same thing as an instruction to stop. It was simply information, and she had decided she could hold both the fear and the forward motion. She reached the study without incident. The drawer was locked, as expected, but Ngozi had already pressed a spare key into her palm before she left the kitchen, taken weeks ago from a hook Chief Obafemi believed no one else knew about. Inside the drawer, a folder thick with paper, and on top of it, unmistakably, a document bearing a signature meant to be hers. A signature she had never written. Her hand shook as she photographed each page with the small camera Baba Rotimi had given her. She did not have time to read closely. She only had time to capture, to preserve, to carry the truth out of the house before the house discovered what she had taken. She was halfway back to the side gate when she heard the front door. It was not him. It was only Ngozi's younger cousin, delivering groceries to the kitchen. His voice raised in casual greeting to another staff member down the hall. Adaeze pressed herself flat against the study wall until the voices faded, her heart hammering hard enough that she was certain it could be heard through the plaster. When the hallway fell silent again, she moved faster now, all caution bent towards speed, out through the side door, across the wet compound yard, through the unlatched gate, and into the narrow street beyond, where Baba Rotimi's car waited exactly where he'd promised it would be. She did not fully breathe again until the car turned the corner and the compound wall disappeared from the rearview mirror. That night, in Baba Rotimi's sitting room, they laid the photograph documents out across the table and read them properly for the first time. What they found confirmed everything Pa Adaeze had said and was a full custody declaration, prepared in advance of the child's birth, citing a forged consent signature and more damning than anything else, referencing a fabricated family council meeting. According to the official council record, Baba Rotimi's old contact was able to prove the next morning that meeting had never taken place. It was not just cruelty anymore. It was fraud, clearly documented, with a paper trail leading directly back to Chief Obafemi's own desk. But Baba Rotimi, ever the careful former clerk, cautioned her against moving too quickly. A document is evidence, he said, but evidence needs a stage. If you go to the family council alone, a heavily pregnant woman with photographs, against a chief with elders and lawyers behind him, they will find a way to explain it away. You need the moment when he cannot explain it away. You need him to reach for that ring in front of everyone who matters, at the exact moment the lie is already exposed. The family council met once a month in the great room of the compound, a tradition older than Chief Obafemi himself, and it was there Baba Rotimi explained that the 90-day deadline would ultimately be decided, where Chief Obafemi would be expected to formally present the registered heir. She went into labor 9 days before the council was scheduled to meet. It was, in its own cruel way, a mercy. She had time to recover, time to hold her daughter in the quiet of Baba Rotimi's small guest room, time to look into a face that was entirely her own and feel, for the first time in weeks, something unguarded and whole. She named her Ifeoma, good things, not because good things had come easily, but because she had decided, holding the small warm weight against her chest, that she would make them come anyway. She did not tell Chief Obafemi's household that the baby had been born. Ngozi, still quietly loyal, confirmed that the family had no idea. They were still operating on the assumption that the birth was weeks away, still waiting to execute their hospital arrangements, unaware that the child they intended to seize had already been born somewhere entirely outside their reach. This gave Adaeze something she had not had since the night in the rain, the advantage of surprise. Pa Adaeze agreed to attend the council meeting and, if called upon, to speak what he remembered. Baba Rotimi's old legal contact, a semi-retired barrister named Mr. Adaeze, who owed Baba Rotimi a debt from decades past, agreed to attend as well, quietly as an observer with the documents ready should they be needed. Adaeze herself, against every instinct urging her to stay hidden and safe, decided she would walk into that room herself, her daughter in her arms, and let Chief Obafemi see exactly what he had thrown away. The great room was full when she arrived, held their formal caps and Agbadas, members of the Adeyemi branch, seated stiffly along one wall, watching the proceedings with the sharp attention of people counting down the days on a calendar only they seemed eager to see expire. Chief Obafemi sat at the head of the room, composed, dressed in the same gold he always wore, a folder of his own documents squared neatly in front of him. He did not see her enter until she was already halfway across the room, Baba Rotimi at one side, Pa Adaeze rising slowly from his seat at the other, the newborn cradled against her chest. The room went silent in a way that rooms only go silent when something has happened that no one present has a script for. Chief Obafemi rose first, recovering quickly, his voice booming with practiced authority. "This is not the place for a woman who has already been dealt with by this family," he said. "The council has business to attend to. The heir will be registered through proper channels, as I have already prepared Haviland here." As he gestured toward his folder, his right hand drifted, briefly, unconsciously, to the gold ring and turned it once. Pa Adaeze, watching for exactly this, spoke before anyone else could. "Turn the ring again, Obafemi," he said quietly, "and tell them the meeting where this woman's consent was supposedly recorded actually took place. Tell them, and turn your ring while you do it, and let everyone in this room watch you do what I have watched you do for 30 years. The silence that followed was different from the first. Mr. Eze rose next, unhurried, and asked simply to present a matter of documentation for the council's review before any registration proceeded. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He laid the photograph pages on the table, the forged signature, the fabricated meeting record, the official council log confirming no such meeting had occurred, and let the elders read them in a silence broken only by the newborn's soft, unbothered breathing against her mother's chest. Chief Obafemi's composure did not break all at once. It broke the way a dam breaks it slowly, then entirely, first in his voice as he tried to explain, then in his hands as he reached again for the ring, and this time seemed to notice, with something like horror, that he was doing it in front of everyone. The council did not need long to deliberate. The forged signature, the fabricated meeting, the confirmation from a man who had watched Chief Obafemi's habits for 30 years. It was enough, more than enough, and by the old rules of the covenant, an attempt at fraudulent registration voided the claim entirely. The title and the land, the elders ruled, would not pass to Chief Obafemi's line by forced deceit. What happened to the succession after that would be a longer separate matter, to be settled through proper process. Duko Chief Obafemi's authority over that process and over the child in Adaeze's arms ended in that room, in that hour. He did not look at her again, as the elders exhorted him out to discuss the matter further, in private. He did not need to. Whatever he might have said, she had already stopped waiting for his words to mean anything. Adaeze walked out of that compound a second time, or this time on her own feet, in her own time, her daughter warm against her chest, Baba Rotimi at her side, Pa Adaeze nodding once to her from the doorway as she passed. There was no rain this time, only grey morning light, ordinary and unremarkable. The kind of light that does not know it is falling on the first day of someone's life beginning again. She did not look back at the gate. She had already learned everything that gate had to teach her. What she carried out instead was smaller and heavier and entirely hers, a name for her daughter that meant good things, and the quiet, hard-won knowledge that she had never needed anyone's permission to fight for either of them.